Good evening, everyone. So, yeah, I'm back. I know it's been a long time, and before I start this video, I want to apologize again to all the patrons that did not get the product that I promised in the beginning, and I really feel bad for it. I know I already apologized for it, but still, I don't feel good about it. So, the reason I'm making this video is that um, it's been a while, and I've been thinking on a lot about the Deadly Safari game, and if I should or not try to reboot the project, and if that is the case, how should I do it in a way that I don't repeat the errors of the past. So I think it's important to give a little bit of context first. So I started this project about, I don't know, I think it was um, was it 4 years ago? I don't remember. Well, it was a long time ago. It's been so long that I don't exactly remember in what year I started working on it. But at the beginning, it was the first time ever that I actually tried to make a game. And at the time, I was not very aware of, how time consuming making a game would be, even if it's something as, well, visually simple as an RPG Maker game. Looks It looks simple and it's fairly simple to use, but it doesn't change the fact that making a game is a very time-consuming process, which was fine in the beginning because I had a part-time job, and that gave me the free time I needed to actually work on the game at the pace that worked for me. So when I started my Patreon, I set up goals and rewards according to what was my situation at the time, and that was my very big mistake, which eventually led to the cancellation of the game, sadly. So my rewards were basically structured in the way that I would have to provide to my patrons updates of the game every month. So what is an update? Well, it was basically described as a new monster, which included the battle for that monster, the sprite models for that monster, but also the game over screens for that monsters. So yeah, that was a lot of work to get done in just short of a month. And my mistake at the time was that I was jumping back and forth between making assets for the game, and when I talk about assets, I mean images, more specifically, but also sounds and everything. But more specifically, images, drawing the pictures that would support, every little pieces in the game, and programming everything together and putting everything together in the game at the same time. That made for a very messy and unorganized development process, but that's the only way I could do it because that was the reward that I promised my patrons. I had to produce a monster every month, and that was very hard. Still, I managed at first. It was hard. I had to put a lot of hours, basically all the free time I had outside of my part-time job. I would dedicate almost exclusively to developing the Deadly Safari game. And for a while that worked. The money I was getting from the game combined with my salary of my regular job was enough to sustain me, and everything was good. The problem arose when I actually got fired from my regular job. And that meant that first of all, I had to find a new source of income really quickly because as much as Patreon was, giving me a source of income, it was not enough to pay my bills, let alone pay my rent. It helped. I'm not trying to say that, the money that I got from you guys who contributed at the time didn't help, but it just wasn't enough to allow me to live and pay my bills. So that's pretty much when things started going south. So my priorities shifted at that point, and I just had to focus on finding a job, so that I could survive. I had no other choice at that time. And it took me 3 months to actually find a steady job, not jumping from, little freelance jobs from left and right just to survive. I did find a new steady job after that, but that took a good 3 months. And by that time, I was 3 months late on my Patreon page. And to make matters worse, my new job was a full-time job, which meant that there was no way I could continue to produce the rewards that I was supposed to produce. So that left me in a very sticky situation. And the thing that I regret the most is that I did not instantly start the per month payment process, and that kept going for a good couple of months before I actually did something about it and changed the mode to a per creation, so that you would not have to pay anything unless I actually started updating for the game again. That being said, my job was just not allowing me to even consider coming back to the game. So yes, I was a coward and I apologize for it. I did not do the right thing. I did not give an announcement. I did not directly stop the income, the per month income setting, so that you wouldn't keep paying and not get anything in return. And for that, I can't express how sorry I am. I'm really embarrassed that this happened. But as for continuing to, well, not continuing to do the game, it was just no longer an option at that point. Not with the reward system and the level of detail and work that I had to contribute to that game. Because believe it or not, to get one monster, that's hours and hours and hours of work for a pay that was great coming from Patreon, but that just didn't justify the number of hours I had to put in it to keep working like that, and on its own was not enough to sustain me. So that's what happened. And I kept a low profile for many years, mainly because I was embarrassed. And little by little, I kind of stick my head out of the sand, and finally did what I had to do and apologized. And that's really all I could do at this point. So that's the context. That's where I am right now. And now I would like to talk about the possible future. Now, don't get your hopes up. I'm not confirming here that I'm starting production on the game once again. I am, however, considering it, and I would like to discuss it with you guys. That's the first step. After that, I will see my options. But if I would start working on the game again, I need to make a lot of major changes, and I need to, first of all, not repeat the mistakes of the past, obviously, but I also need to be very careful on, how I will actually organize to update the game, and just create a workflow that's realistic, that basically allows me to slowly but surely, little by little, build the game. And even if it can take time, it eventually gets there, but it doesn't get in my way of my regular life and my obligations to work my regular job and also have a regular life. Sometimes I don't want to draw, sometimes I want to watch a show on Netflix or play video games. So I need to think outside the box and find a proper solution. One of the solutions I had was to simply not do an RPG game anymore, but convert the concept of the Deadly Safari to a visual novel, which is much easier to do. But the reaction to this, because I already discussed it on my DeviantArt page, the reaction to this by many fans was that Deadly Safari begged to be done in an RPG style. And I think they're right. I think that with monsters and exploration like this, I struggle to see. I mean, there are games that that I can definitely make in visual novels format, like the more bondage and rubber oriented stuff that I do. I think that's much more fitting to a visual novel style. But for for a game that implies monsters and finding monsters, I don't see how a visual novel really contributes to that. So definitely an RPG game is the way to go. So with that in mind, I'm trying to go back to the RPG formula and see what changes I need to make for it to be realistic and to actually, make it happen. So the big mistake, as I explained earlier, that I made for the first iteration of the game was that I created the reward system in a way that forced me to draw assets and program the game almost at the same time. That was insane, and it's really the result of me not being experienced in making a video game, or RPG game more specifically, and that was a big contributor to the game being cancelled and not being able to update anymore, because having to do those two things at the same time to be even able to produce the rewards that I needed, it made things very difficult. So with that in mind, if I should start working on the game again, I would have to separate it in two phases. Phase 1, I need to create assets for the game. Assets are, as I said, basically the elements, the bricks that constitute the game. Be it, the sprites when you explore the map and everything, the sprite characters, the tiles, the conversation, images, the battle images, the game over images, etc. Everything that, all the bricks, as I said, that constitute the game. I need to first focus on that as phase 1 and just do that. No programming, no games just yet, just building the assets and nothing more. That's phase 1. And once I get, say, 80% of the assets I need to make the game, I can actually shift to phase 2, which is not so much drawing, but putting those assets together. And once I put those assets together, the game can start to take shape and I don't lose focus on what my priorities are. So that would be the biggest change, should I even consider going back to the drawing board. What that means for the game, more specifically to my Patreon page, is that I would have to change the reward system entirely. To begin with, I will not go back to a per month payment per month system. I don't think that's fair. That's what caused many backers to pay for 2 or 3 months, if not more, in some cases, in a row without getting anything in return, which is really not fair, and I again apologize for it. So I would stay on a per creation mode, which means that you will not pay a dime unless I actually offer something in return, which I think will already solve one of the biggest mistakes I made in the past. Secondly, the nature of the rewards has to change. Because of what I explained, that I had to focus on making assets first and programming later, it means that the nature of an update might be just a picture, and that's going to be the case for a very long while, until I get all the assets ready. So at first, if you back me, I would just draw stuff little by little. And once I finish this, then I can shift to actually making game updates. And so, I can really put my focus where it needs to be. So the rewards will no longer be one update means one full game demo where you can actually have a full monster to fight and kill. So that's the biggest change that I would have to make on my Patreon. Secondly, the game that I would make from now would be a new game that would basically be the continuation of where the story of the first game or the first demo left off. I'm not going to start like the previous game from scratch. I think this is a very good game on its own, which has a story. It has a couple of monsters. It has a couple of game overs. It has, I'm sorry, I have to be honest. It has quite a bit of content, for what is just a demo. There's a lot of monsters in there and perils for you to enjoy. So I would prefer to consider the first game, the first chapter of the game, if you will. And what I would be making next is basically chapter 2, which is the continuation after the protagonist jumps from the cliff. This would allow me to still reuse assets from the first game, like character poses and stuff like that, but at the same time, I can make the changes that I need to make the development process more realistic. Because there are things that I can simply not do the same way I did with the first game. One of those things was the battle system and the very detailed animations for each battle and some game over scenes. Making every frame for this to be implemented was extremely time consuming, and as I explained, that worked at first, but with my full-time job, that would be, I'm sorry about my phone, that would be mission impossible right now, and I can go back to that system. So what I will do is still create a combat system where you have to fight monsters, but that would be more straightforward. The regular basic RPG Maker combat system, when you have a still image of the monster, you throw spells at it, win, lose, and depending on if you win and lose, you will have the game over screen. I will, however, keep a more simplified grabbing system, because I think that's one of the fun parts of it, is that the monster can actually grab you with web, tentacles, slime, or whatever. And I will still keep like images of the protagonist, gradually being covered more and more with the grab system as it did before. It's just not going to be as detailed and complex and as animated as before. It's going to be much more streamlined and straightforward. That's more realistic for me. So with that being said, the other feature that will not make its return in the game is the character customization. Character customization is not an intricate part, an integrated part of the RPG Maker engine. That's something I had to work around basically to implement it using code and lines. And it worked. It did work, but since it's not really built in the engine, I had to manually add every character variations depending on the first choice you did on when you created a character, and apply them manually with every time adding a line, 2 lines, 3 lines on each event, each battle, so that it would check what were your choices when you created the character. Okay, so you chose pink hair, so for the images that have to show for that battle, have to be the pink hair character and not the brown hair character. Making those character variations with different colors, drawing that was not difficult. It's very easily done with Photoshop, but it's really adding those lines in the game so that every time your choice is taken into account, that was very time consuming. So I'm sorry to say that while I love the idea of character creation, that will not be making its comeback into the game. That being said, I'm willing to do a poll vote, where I will post the different hair color variations and eye color variations and skin color variations, and let you guys vote. Okay, what would be the ideal combination of hair color, eye color, and skin color that will become the final look of the character, and I will keep that look throughout the rest of the game. So these are the big two changes. I have to be honest, it will not be the original vision that I had for the game, with a very complex combat system, very nice animations that really make the peril and the game much more enjoyable to watch. I freaking loved it. I mean, I love doing that snake animation, but it's just not realistic for a one-man crew. Because yes, that's something very important to point out. I am a one-man army in this case, and I know that some of you have suggested that I hire people to assist me. I'm sorry to say that this game is still going to be something fairly niche. I know it has a very good fan base, but it's still not mainstream enough that I can actually afford to hire someone to assist me. I can't afford it, and I can't afford to dedicate myself fully to the game in the way that you would want me to do it. So I can't hire more manpower to split the work and allow me to work more efficiently and make more quality content. That being said, and that will be my final point before I finish this video, if you are an artist that knows how to draw and create character sprites, that knows how to make tiles for RPG Maker so that I can create interesting maps and terrain. Although I know how to make those things, I'm not really an expert in it. It's not really my forte to create sprite characters. I'm very clumsy at it. If you're very good at making sprite characters and tile and basically anything that's not just full scale art, I am more than willing to talk to you and see if we can come to an understanding if you want to help me creating the game. If there's a sprite artist out there that can support me with this, maybe we can talk and have an arrangement, because I think that this would definitely help me create the game faster, so I don't have to worry about making sprites and tiles. And also, while I keep drawing assets for the game, like the character images, the combat images and everything, that person could already work on the sprites for those new characters, those new monsters. So each time I create a new monster, that person could at the same time create the sprites for that monster. So basically, I would not have to worry about it once I'm done doing all my image assets. The sprites would be ready, the terrain and maps, tiles would be ready. So it would be only a matter of me putting all the elements together. So if you are a sprite artist, this is a shout out. Yes, I would be interested. And yes, I could discuss potential compensation in the form of a percentage of the potential revenue that the game would make once it is finished. But I cannot promise a steady income or a salary until the game is actually finished. So do take that into consideration. But yeah, So these are the main points I wanted to bring back. Again, don't take this as an announcement that the game is definitely coming back, but I am considering it and I am open to discussion. But whatever the case may be, I cannot and will not repeat the mistakes of the past. I've disappointed people one time, and I do not wish that to happen again. So take everything I said with a grain of salt. Don't get too excited yet. But yes, I am considering finding a solution for the game to resume its course in a way that would work for everybody, me included. With that being said, I wish you all a pleasant day or night, depending on where you live. And yeah, I'm looking forward to your reactions to this. Goodbye.